All right, today I wanted to talk about a show called, it's a Netflix show called The Inside Man. Side Man. Starring as Grieff, the death row detective. Basically, the idea here is he murdered his wife and now is going to be executed for said murder. And on death row, he spends his time solving cases. So he's kind of this master detective, basically being able to read people. He's able to read things, read people, and solve these cases that nobody else has been able to solve. And yeah, and that's basically the kind of the intro premise of the show. Is he's an interesting character. He's an odd character because he murdered his wife. She's super dead, and he's like, "Yep, I killed her in an absolutely brutal fashion." But he has a very, very strong moral compass. Basically, he only takes these cases that have moral worth. Basically ones that are going to make the world a better place. And we're introduced to this idea, moral, because he has a senator who wants help because he's been accused of assault. Yeah, we'll go with assault. We'll put it nicely. Assaulting women basically 20-30 years ago, and he seems to suddenly get money now deposited into his account, $253.55, every time he sleeps with his wife. And he's very distraught about this and doesn't know what to do. And so basically he's coming up to Tucci's character, Mr. Grieff, that's how it's pronounced. In order to try and figure out what on earth is going on. What's the cause of this, basically. And Grieff turns him down, tells him to shove off, pound sand, I can't really help you, blah, 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 blah. Even though I don't think he never indicates that he doesn't know what it is. He just indicates that he's not going to tell the senator guy. And so the senator leaves, and then Grieff and his roommate, a gentleman named, or his cellmate, I guess you'd call it, his cellmate Dylan, who is accused of murdering 14 women and possibly a cannibal as well, which is a bit much, but okay. And basically this is kind of sets up the stone. So Dylan and Grieff basically act as, the Sherlock and Watson character. This show was created by, I think, Stephen Moffet, I believe is the fellow's name, who did Sherlock, and I have my own opinions about Sherlock, but we'll get to that in probably another video, because more or less it doesn't really come up here. So this is kind of the we'll say scenario, or the setup A. We'll call this setup A, because we also have setup B across the pond, and it's kind of an interesting arrangement, because you don't really know how these are connected basically from there. So we're going all the way across the way. We're going across the way to England, and this is England, if you guys can't recognize it. It's not a terrible drawing, you're just terrible at recognizing. That's how it goes. That's my story. We go across the pond, and we have this young woman on a subway. She's sitting down on the subway. And so what we've got here is basically this woman is on the subway. This is a subway driving, choo-chooing along, and what you have is this woman sitting here, and you have this perverted bully guy who's kind of shoving his pelvic region fairly close towards her. And this is kind of I guess to describe kind of a common low-level sort of, I would go ahead and call it maybe an assault, or at least occurrence or criminal activity, or at least some sort of undesirable behavior. I don't really know what the point of this whole introduction is, other than to introduce Janice. It doesn't really seem to connect to anything other than Moffet basically saying that assaulting women is bad, and women kind of banding together to look after each other, which is great. Assaulting is bad, so it's good that we can have that conversation and get that out there. Make sure that there's no confusion in that regard. So what happens is this guy is basically bullying this woman. Another woman takes a picture of him, and he comes over and then bullies her, and he goes, "Hey, give me your phone." And she says, and that's the part I don't understand, because she just hands it to him. I don't get why, but she just does it. She gives him the phone, and then he starts taunting her. And then there's another woman who says, "I'm not taking a picture, I'm live streaming." And basically you have this great moment where basically the bully is defeated, and then they get off at the next station, and the police are there and take him, basically. And the two women then kind of meet up, and they start to talk and chat, and they start to connect on a human level. They're basically saying, connecting over this shared trauma, or not really trauma, but encounter, basically undesirable encounter that you have. And so they basically have this shared moment, and you can kind of see as this builds the two characters together and bridges them together. Again, what this scene kind of does in a short end is basically this character, the perv bully, is going to engage the audience. We don't care about anything in this subway happening across the pond, over in England, over here, where the tea comes from. We don't care anything about us until this bully shows up and begins to attack this, basically, bully this woman. And so what this does is this is designed to draw the audience in. It's going to make us care about the character. And once we care about it, then you can kind of tell us whatever story you want. This is something that I've noticed about speakers or anything. If you ever do it, sometimes they'll tell personal stories about themselves. And why are they doing this? Because they want us to care about the speaker themselves. And then they can tell you about best business practice in a growing environment, changing generational, workforce environment or something like that. But they always start with this general, let me tell you about me, so you can care about me, and then we'll move on to who knows whatever else. This is the same sort of deal. We're trying to make them care about the characters, and then we go to the next stage. This is kind of continuation of setup B. And by the way, the story more or less jumps back and forth between setup B, and setup A. We kind of jump back and forth between the two characters. And then we lead to Janice, the woman who is live streaming. She is going to go and meet up with kind of setup B2, if you want to call it that. Basically, we have a gentleman named Harry, who is the vicar, played by David Tennant, who is great. He's one of the saving graces in this show. He's the vicar who then basically seems to help this suicidal and very distressed man in his congregation. I believe his name is Edgar, so Suicide Edgar. Wants to hide his porn, and Harry's kind of like, this is silly. But he agrees to do it because the guy's suicidal, and he's like, I'm probably just going to trash it because this is ridiculous. I'm not like, this is, you shouldn't worry that much about your nudie mags or anything like that. Just kind of brushes it off. It doesn't really matter too much. He's not worried about it. He's moving on. So then he goes and he picks up Janice because she is the maths tutor. They have more than one math in England, so it is the maths tutor. And they go pick her up, go to his house, and lo and behold, Janice finds porn. But it turns out it's not just regular, it is, shall we say, underage. So it's very, very dark stuff, incredibly illegal dark stuff. And immediately she starts going, WTF, what's going on? Harry, and this is the part where that kind of the show falls apart, in my opinion, or that doesn't make any sort of sense. Because what you have here is basically the show often operates like an irregular game of hopscotch, basically. So what you've got is over here, you've got 1, and then you've got 2, you've got 3, and then you've got 7, and then you've got 8, 9, 10, and then you have 21, 2, 23, 24, 25. And this is how basically the show is created, is this nice game of hopscotch. And for those of you who don't know, hopscotch, you got to jump between each of these numbers, basically, and that is the whole goal. So what we have here is we have Harry the Vicar, Suicidal Edgar. This is, 1, 2, 1, and then we have Janice over here, who's the maths tutor. They go to the big house, where the vicar lives. All right, they go to the vicar's house with the basement, which will become important. All of this is 1 and 2, or at this point you may call it like 7 and 8. And then what happens is she finds the flash drive with the illegal material. And okay, this is 3, because again, Edgar gave the flash drive to Harry, And then Harry met up with Janice. They went to his home to, tutor Harry's son. I think his name's Ben. He's not really important. And then she finds the flash drive, basically. So all of this is very logical. 1, 2, 3. And then Harry decides that instead of going, yes, actually, we should call the police. Like this, I didn't realize what was on it. We should call the police immediately. He then decides to fight Janice because she goes, oh, this is your son's? He needs to go to jail. He needs to be treated. This is horrible. He needs it. And he goes, no, this is not. This is, well, he can't say it's suicidal Edgar. He just goes, it's the suicide man's. And she's like, that's ridiculous. You're a priest. It's obviously yours or your son's. She basically starts extrapolating. And again, it would be less of a logical jump, but Harry basically forces her to go immediately to the most insane conclusion. Again, there is no logical, and this is where the logic starts to really skip. Basically, Harry says, no, I have to stop her. I have to stop Janice from going to the police. We are going to stop that, and it's not going to happen, and that'll solve the problem. And so what this does then is there's an altercation, and then he ends up attacking Janice. He accidentally hits her when she stops. And then at this point, then he kind of feels like, oh no, I'm in too deep. Now I've got this flash drive. We got this compromising flash drive, and he's attacked Janice, and she's bleeding. I've got to stop her now. And so then he locks her in the basement. He throws her down and locks her in the basement. And basically that gets us to 7. And then the show, because the thing with the show is that there is logical flow. It goes from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 8 to 9 to 10, 11, 12 to 20 to 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. It has this logical flow to it, but there are these huge gaps that lead us to get to where the author or the writer wants us to go that just don't make sense. And this is the problem, because you can't jump back and forth. It would have been interesting, because some people, I was reading online some of the comments and on the YouTube comments, and they were saying, yes, the characters do act ridiculous, they act crazy, they act illogical, because that's how people are. They're just not always these logical robots. The problem is that 90% of the show, they are. That's the problem. Basically, what you have is you have 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, 10, 21, 22, 23. And it's just like there's these huge gaps in logical reasonment. And to give you an example of this, Harry goes down to visit Janice, who again, in the basement down here. She's down here in the basement, and she's acting 100% perfectly logical. Because she goes, you're never going to let me out because you're never going to believe that I'm going to go to police. And Harry goes, yeah, but you're never going to believe that thumb drive isn't mine or my son's, and that it's Suicide Edgar's. So we're at a standstill. This is all very logical. They kind of play out the whole scenario. Janice is really good about playing this entire scenario. She goes, no, you're not going to let me know, so this is the reason why I'm doing this. She spread her blood, like kind of gross, but kind of smart. She spread her blood all the way throughout the entire thing. She's like, I peed everywhere, basically, so there's a trace of me. There's no chance that you can hide or not, no way, but the police will not find some trace of me. You can't get rid of the body. They're going to find me. They're going to catch you. You should just let me go now, and this will be better for you, basically. Something along those lines. And basically Harry goes, well, the thumb drive, you're never going to think that the thumb drive is not mine, so I can't let you go, because especially after I attacked you, especially all these actions, you're never not going to believe this, because she thinks it may be Ben's or his, and he kind of tries to convince her, okay, no, it's not mine or Ben's, and then she thinks it's Ben's, so then he goes, okay, no, it's mine, and then she goes, what? Like, no, it's your son's, obviously. And he's like, no, it's not. So he's trying to protect his son. And there's this dichotomy. But again, there's this huge gap in logic, and it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. And so this is where you get this scenario where you have these characters that are sympathetic. Harry seems to be like a good guy. He's trying. He's really trying, as best you can tell, up until he assaults a woman and locks him in the basement. He's a good guy. And again, if that sounds ridiculous, that's what the show is asking us to do. The show is asking us to sympathize with him because he's trying. He's trying to be a good father. He's got a math tutor for his son. He's trying to be a good husband. He's trying to be a good priest. He's trying to help out the Suicide Edgar. He doesn't really try and help him out because he notices the suicide, and then he's kind of like, he doesn't really know what to do, or doesn't seem to be doing anything, so I don't really know. But then again, it's a really tricky situation, and I wouldn't know what to do in that situation either. Because, Edgar's mother is beating him and kind of abusing him, but it's because turns out he's a pedophile. So it's kind of like, well, what do you do? But either way, to sympathize with these characters, we're asked to, and then they do this absolute ridiculous thing. And so what it does is it creates this insane anxiety about the entire show. It's a thriller because it's thrilling, as the name may suggest, to watch characters that we care about, we sympathize with in horrible situations, basically. It's the character, the parents of the child who move into the haunted house where there's a serial killer or something like that. That's the reason why horror movies love children, because you sympathize with children, and then when you try and murder the children, the audience is dragged along with it, and it's this, has this whole drama, the thrill. Again, if you don't care what happens, then there's no thrill. It's just A to B to C to B. It's math equations at that point. There's nothing at that point. So, yeah, that's kind of what it does. And this is where I think the show really does poorly, is that you're asked to believe that. You're asked to go like, well, because, of course, people are ridiculous. People are logical. They are crazy. And it's like, yes, but I don't believe that these people would actually do that. In fact, it's nothing but just frustrating. It's just insanely frustrating to watch these characters do these stupid actions. Basically, take a bad situation. A situation is take a bad situation level 5 and turn it to a bad situation level 100, basically. Because it's like, listen, if you just call the police, and this is the thing where you're like, okay, well, people, again, act illogical, but it's just like, you have to pass the test. If you have to invite the audience along with this, you have to do something better than this. Because there's even a point where Harry goes and tries to trick a confession out of Edgar, saying, hey, you remember that time when you gave me this flash drive full of illegal material? And Edgar is supposed to go, yeah, I remember that. Of course, he doesn't, because, again, and that part is all reasonable. But then Harry goes, listen, there's a way the police that can trace it to you. You need to go ahead and admit that it's yours, because they're going to find out anyways. It'll go better for you this way. Again, for some reason, Harry seemed to have completely forgotten this whole aspect when he realized that Janice thought the flash drive was his or his son's. Apparently, the police can't do it, but now they can. And again, it's this back and forth that doesn't logically make sense. It's not. It just doesn't work. And so what you have is this. It's extremely anxiety-ridden and extremely frustrating show to watch. It is very thrilling because, again, we like these characters because they do act, in accordance with 1 to 2. We like Janice. I kind of like Harry. We kind of sympathize with him. We like Ben, who just seems to be there, who doesn't really care for maths. So, I like him for that. The wife seems absolutely crazy, but, she's trying to do the right thing for her son because she doesn't want to ruin her son's life, and she cares about her husband, who seems to be trying to do something insane, and she's like, why would you kill her? Or something like that. So you have this whole situation. It just doesn't work, basically. And this is kind of where the show really, in my opinion, one of the main flaws with it, that it doesn't work out because it doesn't add up. This is the thing. The leaps in logic don't add up, and so it just doesn't work from there. Yeah, and that's the thing. So I don't know if I will finish the show. Probably not, but I think it was interesting. It's always kind of fun to watch shows that I don't really care for or that are kind of bad, because then what you have is you get to see why. And again, haven't forgiven Mr. Moffet for what he did to Sherlock, and I'm looking at you, season 3 and 4, but 4, dear God. Dear God, what did he do at season 4? Yeah, so there we go. I hope you guys enjoy this one, and I will see you in the next one.